haven't seen anything, but I'm not
Oh,
gonna say
shit,
I
yeah.
put a whole lot of attention to that.
Well, you can add it or whatever, but yeah, was that good?
Are you Sherry?
Yes, not that.
Well, yes.
Good morning and welcome to the Muscatine County Board of Supervisors meeting. Today is Monday, December 6, 2021, and it is 9 a.m. The first item on the agenda is to review the agenda.
Move to approve as presented.
Second.
A motion by Jeff, second by Scott. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
I vote aye. Any opposed? All right. And Nathan is out on surgery today. Okay, moving on to item number 3. This is a public hearing on the request for Brett and Brianna Simon, record owners, to rezone approximately 3.44 acres in the Waspy Township, 1070 Garfield Avenue in the southeast quarter section of 1T78N-R4W. Parcel C from agricultural 1 district zoning classification to R1 residential district zoning classification. Eric?
So 1070 Garfield Avenue, as read, is about 3.44 acres. It lays on the west side of Garfield Avenue, just directly north, and actually surrounded by some of the city limits of corporate limits of West Liberty. It's been zoned agricultural, obviously, for a really long time. It had been the site of a old nuisance residential structure that we had quite a case on. The Simons family purchased the property, has taken care of that nuisance, got that house torn down, all cleaned up, and they've requested rezoning it to residential for the use of building a single family house on that site. Given the location, relative to mainly existing residential land uses in the city of West Liberty and even some R1 county directly across the road, a very nice paved hard surface road right there. It's really a really good, strong candidate according to the comprehensive land use plan for rezoning to residential. And the zoning commission did last month recommend unanimously to you guys to rezone this to residential. There's really nothing about this property that would suggest it shouldn't be rezoned residential.
I read through some of the information from the zoning commission, didn't have any objections.
No.
But we do have a letter on file from the city of West Liberty that recommend it, they're in support of this action, so.
It's consistent with both the future land use plans of the city of West Liberty and Muscatine County, that residential zoning is the future of this immediate area.
Okay, well, this is a public hearing, so if there's anybody else from the public that would like to comment on this. Okay,
So I
Hearing
make a
none.
motion to close the public hearing.
okay.
Second.
A motion by Jeff, second by Scott to close the public hearing. This is a roll call vote. Doug?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
I vote aye. Lincoln is out. And Jeff?
Aye.
All right, 4-0. Moving on to next section under 3 is discussion and possible action to approve the rezoning of 3.44 acres in the Waspy Township from A1 Agricultural District to R1 Residential District in the first of the 3 readings.
I'll move to approve.
Second.
Motion by Jeff, second by Doug. Any further discussion? Okay, hearing none. Doug, how do you vote?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
I vote aye. And Jeff?
Aye.
All right. First reading approved. Moving on to item number 4, this is a discussion and possible action to approve the change orders number 23 in the amount of $10,031.72 and change order number 24 of $6,199.91 for the Muscatine County Jail booking expansion with Mike Nolan of Horizon Architecture.
Morning, gentlemen. Hope you're well. Nice
Morning,
to see
yes.
everyone again. Okay, so a couple of changes this morning to discuss. We'll start with number 23. So the booking casework it was installed now. We had a solid surface casework, and during design discussions, we had looked at a couple of different options. One of which was to keep the original configuration configuration of desk, which had like a 42-inch countertop height and then a drop down where the detainee would sit. In those conversations, I think we went back and forth, but it ultimately was decided that for security of not reaching around, that was a decision to let's go with a full height countertop, which made sense at the time. I think after we had the countertops and the new casework installed, upon seeing that, Captain McCleary looked at it and just had concerns about the kind of a balance between that and being able to see the detainee's hands while they're sitting there at the booking station. So this request is to modify the casework to drop that center portion down so that the booking officer will have direct line of sight contact to the hands of the detainee during the portion of their being processed into the facility. So in order to do this, it is a full solid surface countertop, so they're gonna have to come on site, modify this countertop, drop that down to create that opening, which is depicted in the sketches, and then basically fold and reform that solid surface countertop around. So it is a fairly pricey change, no doubt, but if you take a look at basically the casework, the way it's designed right now, that seamless solid surface, in order to maintain that same finish when we get done, it's gonna take a little bit of time and effort to do that.
Mike, is this on one booking station, or is this multiple booking stations, or just?
This will go to both, so there are 2 stations that would have the corrections officer will be able to sit behind and then have a detainee on the other side to book in.
Wow.
So that's modifying it. I read through that, it was tops and there's some other modifications in there too, so.
That's correct. Yeah, we'll drop the tops down, and essentially since that solid surface material for the durability comes up and around every bend, it will create a seamless solid surface in the opening, and then we're also going to have some modification to put in some usable space underneath, some shelves and things
Oh,
like
this is
that.
what I see right here.
Yeah, this is
Okay.
what we have now, and that's, which kind of shows how the amount of work they'll have to do to modify.
I can see where it needs changed.
Yeah.
They can't see the people hardly at all.
These eyeballs, but all this. And so that center section is gonna drop to 42 to what?
So we're gonna take it, I think the sketch shows a total drop of 8 inches. I think the request was to take it actually 6 inches to create some usable space underneath, and that would have a sufficient line of sight to be able to see what the detainee's hands are doing on the other side.
Do you have any plans?
In my understanding, there's nothing as far as transactions or signatures, things that more about the interaction between the corrections officer and the detainee.
So the largest amount for this change order is the labor?
Yes, this will all be done on site and in place. In addition, there's a significant amount of dust isolation needs to have, working with the solid surface countertop, cutting that out, sanding it, and then keeping the rest of the machinery in operation. That's just one of the practicalities
This
that we
is
have
what
to
they
follow
did.
at this point.
Mike, we're just modifying what's existing, we're not buying anything new, because the way I read this
The
is,
angle of the picture, isn't it?
they're basically just reusing the material that's there, cutting that out, and then putting that back in.
They'll probably have to
Here
bring in
they
some new
can't see
material.
the guy's hands or anything when they're booking them in. I don't know why they haven't.
And we discussed this before, but then it got missed? Or it was just more or less from the discussion that they didn't think they needed it?
I think from the discussion we originally had, as I recall, is that we looked at a couple of different options, and we had a discussion about whether that cutout should remain. And at that time, I think the understanding was that there was a preference not to have that much of a cutout, because there was a security issue potentially with a detainee reaching around and grabbing something from the other side of the desk. That was the reason we designed it the way it is. That was what's been on the plans, and that was what was reviewed and signed off. I think it's just simply a case of, it's probably hard if you don't look at the plans every day to really understand exactly what's there, and then once it went in place, then it just was, I think we looked at it and said, okay, that's not really what we expected. We didn't understand the impact of taking that out. So I think it's just one of these things that you don't know until you see it, unfortunately.
Mike, correct me here. Are we gonna just take and cut the center down on this standing unit? Is that what I'm understanding?
Yes, sir, that one and the one that's on the other side of the corridor, there's an opening there, so both of those stations will get dropped down. basically we're showing on the sketch is.
There's Mike's drawing.
24 inches wide by about 6 inches.
So basically, that's why I said it's almost like just existing. They're just gonna cut it out, probably use that same board.
And drop down, what did I see, 8 inches?
Yeah. No,
This is,
they're
we're
cutting
gonna,
it
we
to
had a
8
request for 6 inches, we were going to get the pricing done, so it will be actually 6 inches, but just to make sure.
It'll be what?
6 inches total drop,
Okay,
yeah,
Okay, so you're gonna drop the elevation as well too then?
just the center section.
just the center.
Essentially, we're cutting out a 2 foot by 6 foot, or 6 inch notch out of the
2
center.
foot wide, 6 inches high is what they're gonna cut out of it. And it's 42 inches tall,
Correct.
and we're looking at, what are we looking at, $10,000 roughly?
Yeah, that's what's expensive, surprisingly. It
Um,
does for me, honestly. but
is
I'm
that, is this some type of a custom built, unit? Is that what this is?
Yes, this is a solid surface, so, like when you go, it's, trying to get a good example of it. Basically, when you go take a look at them, every single piece of that solid surface material around is totally seamless, so
Uh-huh.
there's no edges, there's nothing exposed on it,
Uh-huh.
for durability. So when they come in, they're gonna have to make the modification, drop it down, and then they have to kind of weld all that together to make it seamless. That's what we asked for, and when we get done, we want it to look just like it come out of the shop that way. So these are full custom modifications.
Yeah, it's, you're $100 and some a square foot to modify it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's just one of these things that there are certainly less expensive ways to do it, but I think if the recommendation is, we wanna do this and have the product ready to go for the next 50 years in the space, so, get it done, get the function set up correctly, and then get the casework.
We've had a few change orders. Where are we on our contingency on this project?
We're still under a
We're still in good shape.
Sure.
And then we kind of, last conversation I think Eric, you had with us, is we felt like a lot of the concealed condition stuff that we knew were risks going in on this project, we're pretty much through that. We think that some of these, like the ceiling and the sprinklers and some of those electrical, things we couldn't see in structure, we're probably past most of the high-risk areas on this now, so.
Well, certainly as Mike, I'm sure agree, phase one is by far more the complicated, phase, that, not surprising that there would be more change orders on phase one. Yeah, a couple of big ones at the beginning were some of the high-field, structural issues that we had to deal with.
I mean, in your opinion, isn't that a little high? Or I should just say, is your opinion, do you think that's a fair price? I should
I
ask.
think it's a fair price, given what we've asked them to do and the conditions we've asked them to perform it under. So the fact they're gonna come and modify those in place, do them one at a time, so we can keep one station open, so there's a little phasing with that, and then do extensive dust control so that we don't get migration of this fine particle throughout. There's a lot going on there.
Well, this is a classic example of you don't wanna spend $10,000, but you
No.
also don't wanna hate this every day you work on it,
Yeah.
So, you, in my opinion, you have to bite the bullet, shall we say, and we have to make it so it's correct and it's workable and it's safe for everybody and move forward.
Yeah, and I think situations like this, to avoid your options are to buy mock-ups in advance, which you're gonna spend the 10 grand down anyway, cause it's really not enough stations to worry about, but that's what's commonly done in situations like this, is they purchase mock-ups of the stations and say, okay, does this work the way it is? So I would say that I'd hate to make this investment and
I do too.
not like the
I hate to make the investment, but I hate even worse that there's safety involved and the workstation, you hate the workstation every day. If it's here for 50 years and you hate it every day for 50 years, that doesn't make any sense to me.
Absolutely, and more to the point, it's just the safety and the operational concern. This isn't gonna work properly, basically for the jail to do what it needs to do safely and effectively, then it's almost a gotta do, so. We did look at some other options, video and things like that. I think we just ultimately decided that that's not the right way to go. We just need to modify the station and have that visual connection.
Mike, if we would have had 3D views of this, would that avoided this potential?
possible. I think that really, and I don't wanna speak for Captain McCleary, but I think is when you sit down at that desk, that's probably the time that you would be like, oh. So I think it really comes down to the 3D may have looked fine, but unless you have that actual experience of sitting there and seeing what that actual sight line does, I think it's just something that may have been an assumption on their part, and something we didn't really hear about, that visual, and that's not something I recall talking about, and that's not something that we did, and it just may not have been something that was brought up at the point. I think we did a pretty good job on this one, of trying to have those conversations, and that, just every single thing that we think about day in, day out, may not have came up in those conversations, so.
Okay.
Well, just actually, taking the time to, like Jeff said, but I wouldn't spend the $10,000. I'd just have built some cardboard mock-ups is what I would do, just to look at, so you got a visual.
Well, I mean,
you
in a 3D view, and I think that's the challenge, that when they can put a person in it and make it so they can see, oh, this is not gonna miss that. And, I mean, honestly, 3D view, printing or 3D views probably cost, and it's not like a mock-up 3D, it's just a computer simulation of what that person would look like when they're sitting in there. But they go in and they scan the whole building inside, and they can say, and they can make that. That probably costs $10,000 in itself, but then that could have a lot of potential change
Yeah.
orders and cost views. I mean, it does, because then you can see it before it all happens.
Nothing is free.
Right, and even with that, Santos, a lot of people they don't have the vision in their head, they can't visualize, so that creates issues as well. For a lot of folks, you actually have to have something to look at and a place to
Yep.
set and see what it actually is before they're able to gather that information in their own mind.
Sherry, can you give us the total of what the change orders are next possible meeting? What we're at for a total so far?
I don't have that number right off the top of my
No,
head.
I know, but
have it.
can we get that or email it to us so we know where we're at? I'd like to make sure we're tracking this a little more.
You wanna take these separate, or you wanna take them together?
I want to take them separate, just so.
Okay, so I'd move to approve change order 23.
Okay.
I'd second it.
I have a motion by Jeff, a second by Scott. Any further discussion? Can we get a picture or something when this is complete? I'd like to look at it.
Yep,
as well.
absolutely.
All right. All those in favor signify by aye on the first item for approval.
Aye.
And I vote aye. Any opposed? Okay, change order number 24 is the second one, which is basically the sprinkler systems, number 24. If you could share a little more on what's going on with this one.
Absolutely. So I think last week we had the first round of sprinkler system change orders. Essentially what we had on plan was we had it marked and surveyed in the existing zones, since we weren't making significant changes outside of the booking cells or the new holding cells and the new Sally Port. The existing zone sprinkler system, we had that marked as existing to remain. What we found is the fire protection, they come in and looked at that to adapt that system to accommodate the new ceilings. We went from a gypboard ceiling with an expanded metal lap underneath it to basically a modular security metal access ceiling. The modification to do that, they're having to make little tweaks to every single sprinkler head. Unfortunately, once you take a sprinkler head out, you can't reuse it, so those have to be replaced. So during the first round, essentially what happened is they were on site making the first modifications to accommodate the ceiling. And they said, we're here today, we need to do this, so we coordinated with Eric to go ahead and get that work approved. So that was the first round you have there, so that was an on-site. So what I asked is that they go through the remainder of the project, look at all the rest of the sprinkler system and all the other modifications that may need to be done, and get the work approved in advance, which is typically how change orders should work. So Tri-City Fire Protection did that, and what they came down to is that they need to modify 8 existing head locations to coordinate with the ceiling. And that's the change order we're looking at here. The other request with this is that we're having lead time items with several things. Fire protection is one that's a particular challenge right now. They have the silver or the gray heads, which we have specified are a 4-month lead time, or they can swap out and do an alternate to a white sprinkler head, which you can see is a 3 to 4 week or a 3 to 7 day lead time rather. It is a comparable to what is spec'd, it's just a different finish. Given that the ceiling is white, I don't see this being a significant issue. If you're okay having a slightly different look in a few of the sprinkler head locations. I recommend approval of this change order.
When you said that they were coming in and finding issues. Is that the city inspection, or who's the one that was said that they had those issues when they were coming in looking at that?
This is actually from the fire protection contractor, so the older heads, and I'm not sure if it's exactly a height or a location, the whole buildup of the ceiling was about, maybe 3/4 of an inch thick. With the new ceiling, it's just a metal pan, so it could be possible that even to access and get those sprinkler heads to go through the new ceiling, they're having to take those old heads out and put them back in. So in the course of that, they cannot by NFPA reuse a sprinkler head once it's been removed. So we're having to install new. So I think it's just a case where they weren't able to work with the new ceiling to put the existing back into place as anticipated.
You also mentioned that they went in and did an inspection, and then they looked through the rest of is that just for phase 1, or is that for phase 2 as well?
What you're seeing here, this is to the completion of the project with phase 2. So we asked them after the last round, which was just the phase 1 to get us through that, I asked them to go back prior to to performing the work and tell us everything they needed to do, and to give us another change order so they could have that approved ahead of time versus having it approved in the field. So this is the final final sprinkler change to the remainder of the project to address all the heads.
This seems like the last one was about the same amount too, is that correct?
No, it was considerably less, there was just
Yeah.
2 or 4 that I had to approve that afternoon because they were on site. We didn't know when they were gonna be back.
Okay.
And then that's when Mike said, get through what's in phase 2, so we're not having to make these in the field change order approvals. There was only, 2 or 4 on that phase 1.
I don't recall the exact number.
It was considerable, it was less though.
A couple thousand.
Yeah, I think so.
I can pull it up right now, actually.
I knew when I went in there, I saw some of these, some of them were protruding, I think in that safety cell, the one with the padded one, I think there was one that had on something like this as well too.
The last change was south entry for 2 sprinklers was 2,500, because this was in 2 parts. And then for the remaining, was 1,100. Now I can go through, I've not had a chance to walk and see exactly where these 8 sprinkler locations are. So if that's something you prefer, and I think we have time to do that, we can certainly go do that.
I just wanted to make sure that we were, if you're having that group go in there, look at it, so that way we're not getting back in and having to pay expediting fees, continuing to
Right.
try, if they're reviewing everything and they're identifying that, then we need to make sure that
Yeah.
we're doing that, and that way we're not coming back and having 2 or 3 come in next month, or 2 or 3
Right.
following up on that.
That was the direction, was to give us everything else. So that's my understanding, that this is everything else in the project.
Okay, my next question, is it a code requirement not to be able to reuse those?
It's an NFPA requirement apparently, that once you take it off, because they have to be put onto a certain torque, and they're basically a one shot, one use.
Wow, that's almost like a, okay.
It's
By what authority?
I don't even wanna get into that, so that's fine.
it's a highly specialized industry, so.
Yes. With good lobbyists. So I'll move to approve change number 4.
And with that comment, I'll second.
All right, we have a motion by Jeff, a second by Scott. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by aye for change order number 24, the amount of $6,199.91. All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Same sign opposed. All right, change order number 24 approved. Mike, while we have you here, is it possible you could give us a little bit of an update of where we're at on this project?
Yep, absolutely. We are, they were probably 99.9% complete with the phase 1 work, and we're currently coordinating the transition. So we're in an intermediate phase right now, which is, we gave Swanson a little bit of, if you recall, phase 1 was do all the work on one side, and we're gonna swap over and then complete the work on the other side. Swanson has requested a few modifications to the phasing in order to accommodate things like replacing ceilings, demolition, and flooring. And we are gonna go have a discussion on exactly how we expedite that intermediate phase this morning as soon as we finish our conversation. Following that, we're gonna be working into phase 2, which will be basically the remainder of the exterior work to get the Sallyport masonry completed, get the interior renovations done. And when I was on site Wednesday, they had most of the interior demolition done, so that will make a modification of the former vestibule into a new holding cell, add in another holding cell / janitor closet for the short term, and then we'll complete the remainder of the flooring, and then the ceiling installation. At this point, and Eric, I don't have the, schedule, but can you recall what they had their anticipated completion date was at this point?
I don't have it with me, I think he was back to January 15th, 20th.
Mid-January. I would
For
anticipate
the entire project?
for the entire project, yeah. This phase two, once we get through this intermediate portion, should move pretty quickly. We'll get you a better update on where that is. We're probably, I would say overall, about 6 weeks behind on the project. Some of that's been through phasing, some of it's been through material availability, but all in all, for where we are, I think we're actually moving okay. The biggest concern we have right now is making sure that we're balancing the contractor work needs with the operational needs of the facility.
Yeah.
I haven't heard too many issues in the operation as things are going relatively well.
Well, we've been trying to handle that stuff at the staff level, as Mike mentioned, we're going to be having a very serious conversation about getting into this phase over. It's to the point where some things need to happen, but we're working on that, and trying to throw those fires out as they pop up.
Mike, I know that we had talked about this, and I think we talked about it in the budget at one time, is possibly at the end of the project having kind of like an exit interview, a critique of what went well, what we can do better, what items can we address, so we as a county can learn on what other possibly improvements we could do in projects as we continue to focus on budgeting on other projects throughout the year. And I think that this particular project would be an ideal one that we would anticipate. Again, it doesn't need to be a huge request, but I think it's something that I would like to see that we have with Swanson, Tri-City, and staff. Just, you know, a small meeting that can say, hey, what can we do? How can we improve on it? And then you as a you know, lead on a lot of these projects, you can implement those changes as we start moving forward into other projects and saying, what things have we learned? Is it, you know, are we trying to do these things repetitively and we're having the same problems, and what can we do? Just, it works really good in I think more in the industrial world that I'm part of, and I think it's more just around critiques on how we can improve on and having all the parties in. It's not trying to find negative, you know, pointing fingers. It's more about constructive feedbacks and what can we do to improve, making sure that we as a group and as a owner of that are getting the product that we want, and you as a manager can help us get that.
Absolutely. The idea of continuous improvement, I think we're seeing some of that on this project. This is a very complex project we've gotten
Yep.
into, and there's a lot of moving parts. So I'm pleased that things have worked where they are. We figured at some point we were gonna have some hard conversations, so here we are. But I think at this point, there are certainly things that work well and things that we can improve on. Some of the changes we've talked about here, I'm taking notes on how we can better engage with county staff and just make sure that we are helping better visualize and ask the right questions. Which will be, I think, the next change. Like I said, the power and data coming out is also a fairly sizable number. So that's another question of what makes sense and how do we do that better in the future. Again, everything we had talked about was on plan. I think there's just some of maybe the desires or requirements changed or modified throughout the course of the project, so we'll have a little more conversation on that.
Again, I think the more communication we have, the less issues we tend to run into. So I think, you know, seeing that and having those conversations up front as much as we can from staff and from you and your teams help us a lot. So
Yeah, I know one of the challenges I think that we had in this going in is with this contractor has communications and process improved with the contractor? Do we feel like they've done a better job than in the last project?
again,
Communication's good, I just think every time we agree, they change the goalposts a little bit more.
Yeah.
So, I think we're gonna have a conversation about that after this meeting.
some of those things would be good to have at the end when we talk about that shutdown, or, I mean, the, you know, project completion critique, or whatever you wanna call it. My end goal is for you guys to share that feedback with the contractors, with us, and with you guys as a staff to know how do we improve next time. So if we, set a goalpost, that we really follow up with it, or we end up saying, hey, why did we change? If it was material, labor, or delays, then we know how we can improve, but
Absolutely.
I don't think this meeting should be for that. I think it was more, I want to have that request that you guys possibly set that, and we end up having that critique done after the project completion, so then they know that they're gonna provide us. And again, it's good constructive feedback. It's not me just trying to point fingers at all.
No, the debrief is the most important part of the mission. You got it.
Okay. Thank you so much. Mike, anybody have anything else? All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike. All right, moving on to item number 5. This is a discussion and possible action to approve the memorandum of understanding between the city and the Muscatine County and to establish a joint city and county precinct with the county auditor, Tybee Vander Linden.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
The current temporary redistricting commission, we have met 3 times. We have nominated Jeff Chown as our chairperson, so he is here today to explain this memorandum of understanding with the city of Muscatine. And we do have some handouts.
Thank you.
Give you a chance to look at those for a minute.
Okay.
The timing of it, the process is a little different this year than it was 10 years ago with the fact that our census data did not arrive, in a timely manner, but our deadlines, they changed their deadlines for when they could give us the data, but they did not change the deadlines for us to produce results. So everything's been compacted, and, but the process is going well. We have excellent technical people that are crunching the data and coming up with these maps. The maps before you, one of the hard and fast rules is that you cannot split census blocks. And so you see on the handout there that there is one census block that has that is split since January of 2020, that one of the portions has been annexed by the city. And so it split that census block into, part of it is in the city, part of it is the county. We are not allowed to split that into 2 different precincts. So therefore, we have, in discussions with the city and those, we have came up with a plan to put those 9 residences that are part of the county that's not annexed into the city precinct, and it shows on the map there. Yeah. I guess I didn't. Yeah, grab my map here. I've got this one.
Yeah, so those are those few properties right along University
Yes.
on that side. And those weren't, I'm looking at your, oh, okay, so
They're already building on this, aren't they?
no, well, they're building on they annexed that
Right there they
area off
Yeah.
Colorado. But those homes that are along University, cause that whole area has been we've had over the years, we've had complaints about roads and different sight lines and things there, so that's been a little bit of a problem spot anyway. Confusion whether what's city, what's county. I think the simple thing would be the city just to annex those homes.
And they did in
Well,
February
they
of
annexed it
2020.
February.
They annexed those homes as well too?
Yeah,
It was after the
You know, it was in.
Oh,
they
so
asked
the
in
redistricting
February.
happened before the annexation, so they
Yes.
weren't put into the redistricting, so now we get to.
Yes.
And then I also see, it looks like in your, Jeff, maybe I'm jumping around on this, also up by Monroe and Adams, you're proposing to pull another block into this precinct, is that correct? Am I reading that map right?
The red lines are the city, is the, is
Current
the-
boundary,
the-
right?
The city boundary, that's the city
Precinct,
boundary.
city boundary.
Yeah. And then that little notch
Is the proposed boundary.
is what's in the count, what's still in, the you know, in district is considered as part of the county.
I think we're talking about two different things here, Jeff.
Yeah. I see what's going on up around Shamrock and University, and I understand that.
Yeah, that's what the memorandum of understanding, that we
Okay.
need to get to the city
Yeah, we're
with
required
approval by the
by-
9th.
So the MOU has to cover that little area,
Yeah.
because we're talking about things that are
Right, I get it.
outside of city
Jeff's question
limit
is
or.
about why that.
Yeah, it was annexed in February of 2020, which, if it had been annexed prior to January of 2020, it would have already been in that census block to be part of the city.
Okay,
But it was 1 month later, and so now with an agreement with the city and the county, it would, be
We could-
approved that it's part of that census block.
okay. Now I'm starting to understand it. It was just a timing thing on the census data versus the annexation.
Yep.
Yeah, and there are 9 residences on, 9 residences on the other map behind it. You can see those roof lines.
Okay, I think I'm clear now.
This is the agreement that we're asking.
Okay. So,
Okay, so then, do we have any questions or a motion to approve?
I would move to approve the memorandum of understanding with the city as presented.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Jeff, a second by Doug. This is a possible action to approve the memorandum of understanding between the city and the county. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right.
Jeff, thank you for your
Jeff.
help with this. I know these are always kind of thankless jobs that have to get done. We appreciate folks like yourself stepping up and doing that.
Jeff, while you're up,
Yeah.
how are we coming along on the whole world redistricting as far as the outskirts of the rest of the phases on this?
We're waiting on one detail, and then we'll be able to pretty much wrap things up. And we just, we're dealing with, waiting for, another city to make a decision.
Oh, okay,
But,
okay.
then we'll be, like, we've got everything pretty much taken care of. We just need to, we're tying up some loose ends, make everything official, and then we'll be able to make a presentation shortly.
So when do you think that would be?
Late December, 1st of
We're
January,
hoping to get it in.
partly because of the holiday, but also it has to be approved into the Secretary of State by January 15th. So if we bring you Plan 1, and it's during a public hearing, and it's discussed and rejected, and we'll come back to our commission and we will present a Plan 2. So we're certainly under a time restraint.
Yeah, with the late delivery of the census data, I mean, all of this was supposed to have been done this summer, basically. But since they didn't get us the data it was 6 months late, basically, that, yeah, they could change their deadlines, but we can't change ours for when we have to have it done. So it's been kind of a scramble to get everything ready.
And the way it always works.
But we see the light at the end of the tunnel, and we should, if everything goes smoothly, we should have no problem meeting the deadline.
Good, good. Well, we appreciate your help on that. Thank you so much. All right, moving on to item number 6. This is a discussion and possible action to approve the minutes of November 29th, 2021's regular meeting.
So moved.
Motion by Jeff, seconded by Scott. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
And I vote aye. Any opposed? All right, correspondence, Jeff?
Nothing to know.
Okay, I had a email from, Don Briggs in regards to wanting to request, the city or the county looking at lifting the partial ban that we have on some of the county roads and wanting to know where we were at on potential having that as a discussion or on an agenda item. I know that we had discussed, wanting to review that after a year. I think, Scott, you were on that with me. In regards to looking at that, and I think that that's something that, we can continue to have that discussion. I think I'd like to hear something back from the sheriff, in regards to seeing what feedback he has and his team, before we were able to possibly grant, Mr. Briggs any conversation in regards to that. I also, reached out to the city and, the city attorney and the county attorney and, the city waste manager in regards to the 2080. We are required to have that updated by January, and I want to make sure that they're moving on that, and it sounds like they are reviewing the edits. I think I CC'd you in on that too, Jim, making sure that they're aware that we need to have that approved, come mid to late January, and looking at where they're at on that. I also, had an email from, Kurt, in regard to Kurt Weiss, in regards from where we were possibly looking at for that, routing. He said that he was gonna be working with his staff, trying to make sure that where that route would be if we go up through Pettibone for the city, for the sewer system potential, and may not be running all the way to the, main entrance. So that's still a discussion that, you know, I'd like for him to be able to provide to us. So if we start looking at that as a potential, request for, American Relief dollars, we would have a firm idea where that route is. So Kurt, if, you know, we can follow up on that, but we got a generic routing. Also, had a small email in regards to Eric, in regards to some of the change orders when I'd followed up on looking at that on the agenda, just following up on some of those questions on that. Other than that, that's all I had for, correspondence. Scott?
I had the email from Don Briggs, and yeah, we can take and review this at this year's time, and input from the sheriff's office would be very good on that. I just had COVID update as far as email, and that's all I had.
All right. Doug?
I had the one from Don Briggs and the COVID. The only thing I would say on the email from Don Briggs is that I think Keith White should be included on that conversation,
Yeah.
taking any restrictions off.
Yeah, I think we need to revisit the roads and wanna have a conversation with the secondary roads group and with the sheriff about what they've seen and where they are.
I know it was something that when we had first had it passed, I know that Scott had brought up that, you know, let's try it for a year and then we review that. So I think I would, in that same discussion, I think it would be, you know, good for us to have all those groups together, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
That's all I had.
Okay, committee reports? Doug?
None.
I had none.
I had, the WE lead for West Liberty. It was our selection for, new members and members coming off, and I was elected to become the president of the WE lead, or I was nominated, I guess you would say. And,
Or drafted, depends on how you.
yeah, it was not something that I requested, I will say that, so. But very good meeting, and, that's all I have for that one. Jeff?
No committee reports.
All right. Okay. Moving on to item, number 9, and this is items with administration office. Oh, wait, on correspondence, I did get, the email from Nancy that was gonna be off, but also talking that on the agenda for December 13th, that we would have the process for the American Relief dollars, that would be on the agenda, Sherry, I don't know if you were CC'd on that, but it was something that we had requested, to try to get on this month. We're not going to be reviewing the projects or the request. We are only gonna be reviewing the process and possibly having you and Nancy involved, so we as a board can understand it before we start actually, going into budget and doing that. So I wanna make sure that that was,
Yeah, a number of
identified.
counties have looked at putting processes in place. I think it's good for us to decide what the process will be, what the rules will be, and how the board will deliberate on that to move forward. Very good. So the 13th, that's on the.
That's on the agenda for the 13th, and I just wanted to make sure that we had that, updated, so when she was back off of that.
So Keith and Kurt and those that might have projects that would be eligible or they may think might be good for.
It'd be good to possibly
So we all are
understand
on the
how,
same page.
yeah, but again, I think coming into January, February is where we're going to have the discussions in regards to identifying what those projects are, and then kind of earmarking what dollars we're going to be having for those discussions as well too,
I think
but,
our
so we're not
notions
gonna spend that on the.
I think our
13th.
notions are to kind of have some ideas on what we may do with those in conjunction with budget hearings, so that we
Yep.
all can plan accordingly.
Correct.
Santos, I missed one thing on the correspondence. I did get a call from John Miller about the locks on the gates down there, and apparently somebody else has added one that's not ours. And I talked to Keith about it,
The locks.
on the
On
gates.
Keokuk.
on
Oh,
Keokuk.
Keokuk, okay, all right,
And
so,
it's not ours, so
oh, all right. Okay.
I thought I'd add that.
Yep, thank you. All right, so moving on to item number 9, this is items with the administration office, and this is discussion and possible action to set the public hearing for Monday, December 27th at 9 a.m. on the proposed amendments to the Muscatine County Floodplain Management Ordinance.
Just real quick, because that's all you're doing is setting the date for the public hearing. This will really be the final piece in the kind of large remapping process we started a couple of years ago. You remember we had some public meetings where FEMA came in conjunction with the DNR. Part of that, the DNR and FEMA take a look at current floodplain management or floodplain development ordinances. And yes, we have under home rule the ability to have our own floodplain development and management ordinance, but the reality is every bit of the language has to be approved by the DNR and FEMA to maintain compliance with the National Flood Insurance Program. So there was a lot of recommendations. Ours hasn't been updated in a lot of years. So we're probably looking at considering repealing and just readopting an entire ordinance. The good news is there's not a lot of substantive changes that raise the bar as far as regulations or requirements for people building in the floodplain. I see a lot of the recommended / mandated changes as language clarifiers, better definitions that are actually going to be beneficial down the road. So there'll be a lot of little wording changes, but I'm not seeing much that makes life harder or more expensive for people necessarily. Now, obviously, we can discuss at a local level and choose to make things harder than the bare minimums, just like any ordinance, or more strict. But we'll discuss all that. It's really a result of the floodplain mapping update in conglomeration with some ordinance.
So when we set that though, not just the hearing, but when we set that location for where that ordinance is, does that like coincide with what insurance agencies would say, hey, you're in a floodplain, so now you gotta pay more? Is that what that does?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. There are certain, like I said, there are certain parts of the ordinance that have to be in place, certain requirements for us to maintain eligibility, Muscatine County residents, to even access federally backed flood insurance, National Flood Insurance Program. They've been making changes to that insurance program the last year, I think rightfully so, because there's been a tremendous amount of payouts over the last decade in flooding, so things are getting more expensive for people in the floodplain. That has nothing to do with us, that's just the National Flood Insurance Program. But we have to maintain at least a certain standard for our residents to be eligible for flood insurance.
Okay, well, we'll look forward to that on Monday, the 27th at 9 a.m. So this is for that date. Do I have a motion to set that?
I'll make a motion.
Okay.
Second.
Doug, We have a motion by Doug, a second by Jeff to set the public hearing for December 27th at 9 a.m. All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, 4-0. Any other items from the administration? All right, moving on to items with county employees. This is number 10. Any county employees that would like to state anything or comment on anything that we have?
Some folks had already mentioned that, talking with staff, and then from what came out of our board meeting, kind of the idea on the sewer lines. Running down the Deep Lakes Park, since now most of the planning is coming off the north end of the park, I do not see a need to run that sewer line any further down Pettibone. Once we get down to 41st Street, take it over top of 41st Street and then run it into the park at that point. There's gonna be some features on down there at Pettibone that might require some type of sanitation, but it's gonna be such low volume use that we could probably get by with those with either pump out pits or some type of a septic system, such as what I'm thinking about. We're looking at building our maintenance building down there. Should have a restroom in there for employees, but you're gonna have 1 or 2 employees using that. You know, we can't justify running a sewer line down there. That also, by not going down there, that cuts out 2 railroad crossings, which I'm sure is not gonna be cheap to go across when you run it down there. But, you know, that's gonna be your decision if you think there's future use for. But as far as for what the park needs, we do not need that run down there on Pettibone.
You don't think that there'd be an advantage to having something in the beach area and all that?
Well, that's a possibility, but again, that would be such low volume, we probably could get by with a septic system of some sort on that. You know, it just comes down to how much, you know, how much is it gonna cost to run a full sewer down that, you know, 600 feet or 800 feet? Can you justify that for a shower house?
And at one point, I thought I'd seen a plan off that old Hall Road for some cabins or something. And so
Right,
we're
now
not-
I think most of the thought behind from our board and staff is to move everything up toward the north end of the
Okay.
park.
Okay.
Yeah, stay where, you know, we have the 4 cabins down there where they're at, but any new ones are probably gonna be on the north end because much higher ground will be
Okay.
safe.
Where you have that line coming in on the west side, that's basically where your Bolton meat design is
That's where the
supposed to
road
be planned to
will
go
enter,
to?
right there, coming into all the development that'll be in there. Not saying there wouldn't be also some development off of 41st. To the east, there's a parking lot there, not an ideal place to put some more cabins as well, but it, you know, it would be real close to the sewer line on 41st.
So, this dimension, do we have a footage by chance?
I quick marked that out. The original footage, I believe, that Bolton Mink and also the city engineer was working on was, sure I remember, it was a little over 1,700
Feet?
feet or something like that. And now we're down to like 69. It saves us, you know, 100 feet or something like that. I can get those for you. I'll just make sure I get those.
Okay. Yeah, it'd be good just to have that in the next couple of months, know what that dimension is, and then also we'll have that discussion in regards to what that sizing needs to be according to what Bolton Mink had, because if the city or MPW wants to be involved, I think I'd like to focus on what we're doing, and then if there's an upgrade, I think they should have some input, but I think from my perspective, it's about making sure we're meeting the needs for the county.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, well, thank you so much, Kurt. Any questions, comments?
Thank you. Good answer.
All right, any other comments from county employees? Okay, moving on to item number 11, comments from the public. All right, Any other comments from, the board? All right. If nothing else, it is 9:54, meeting adjourned.